Okay, folks, so picking up where I left off on the previous video about the Carrera Power Track and controller situation, I was mentioning that if you get to a larger track and maybe cars that aren't running as well as they could have when they're brand new, things like that, you end up relying a lot more on this turbo button to get that last bit of power out of the car, and you may be doing little micro taps of it through the corners or whatever just to try to keep it from bogging. And these buttons wear out. I've got a bag of them where these buttons have gotten worn out, and that's basically what I found to be the weakest link in the Carrera system, is these doggone turbo buttons. Because when they, if they get unreliable, it becomes kind of frustrating, because you start hitting it as you're coming off the corner, maybe on a long straightaway, and it doesn't work, so you hit it again and hold it, and by then you're already into the next corner and you're flying off the track, and that's, it's a real bummer. But this most recent generation of Carrera Power Tracks, I have to give a hand, because I do feel that the throttle response is a little bit smoother than the earlier ones, and you also get more of the throttle out of the thumb depressant versus the turbo button. I think you're getting maybe 0 to 70-ish here, and then you get the last 30% out of this button. Whereas on the next generation before that, the slightly earlier generation, which is, I guess, is this one here from what I have been able to kind of glean, here the controller looks a little bit different. Let me show you. The newest one, the controller is much smoother, and then the older one has kind of dimples on it. Or little pimples on it, I guess you'd call it. Not dimples, but pimples. Well, anyway, this one, instead of the stuff plugging in horizontally here, on these it plugs in vertically like that. But other than that, I don't really see any big changes. Dimples or pimples, horizontal plugs, and it seems to otherwise be relatively similar as far as its operation. Now, the slight difference is that I feel like you get only like 0 to 60% or so on this thumb, and then when you push the turbo button, you end up going from 60 to 100. And so that's even slightly less usable and overall less smooth. Not a big not a fan, but it's okay, and it works good with the regular Carrera cars. Well, also there was either a previous generation or maybe the same generation, I'm not exactly sure, that has 4 inputs on it instead of just the 3. And on these you end up getting a different transformer that has 2 cables that come out of it to plug into it, even though it's just one transformer. Now there's once again a couple different models of these I've run across. This is the one that has a smaller transformer. It still has 2 cables coming out of it. And then there's a larger transformer that also has your 2 cables coming out of it. They're both rated exactly the same, and that's what's really bizarre. And not only that, if you look at that and you compare it to the rating of this other transformer, which is the same size as this, basically what they're claiming here is this is a 14.8 volts, 700 milliamps, 700 milliamp hours. Okay, this one also 14.8 volts, but it's 2 times 350 milliamp hours, so it's the same doggone thing. And then you got this bigger one. Once again, I'll show you. Look at the difference in the size there, and this one still says the same thing. It's 14.8 volts, 350 milliamp hours times 2. Well, let me tell you what I found from experience, is that this track with the 4 inputs and the bigger transformer has provided the most reliable power when using other brands of cars. What I've started to run into with any of these earlier models, and even with this one too, is that especially with a car that maybe its motor isn't perfect, or you're using an off-brand car that maybe pulls more current, some safety mechanism, which I believe to be in the track, in the power track, would actually shut off power to the lane. And this could be really frustrating too. I'd have a good drone race going, and You know, maybe I'm winning or losing or whatever. It's a good race. I'm having fun. A few laps from the end, all of a sudden the drone car just shuts off. So that's really disappointing, and that's not a whole lot of fun. So as I kept messing around with it, trying to figure out what was going on, I actually had realized that this, of course, this power and this power track was working the best for me, but it still wasn't flawless. And so I kept trying to figure out how can I make it better. Well, I cut off one of the legs of that transformer, and I put this big computer power supply on there, which has a heck of a lot more power. Actually, I tried using individual power supplies plugged in here, and that didn't really change anything either. And then I swapped out this bigger computer power supply that has, I think it's like a 2 amp power supply at 15 volts. So it's you know, way more potential. It's basically not more power to blow anything, but it's more potential if you need it. And so I thought this might give me an advantage. The track still would shut off under the same basic circumstances, maybe not quite as quickly, but still around the same, you know, the same kind of situation was arising. And so I think I determined that the actual safety features, the power cutoffs on all of these is actually in the power track and not in the power transformer. So despite what you might think you're going to do, you're still faced with that. And I'm trying to get around that problem. So that brought me to the final solution, which is maybe not the final solution yet, but it is a solution, which was to use another computer power supply that I got from China Direct. And here's your unboxing, the unboxing of the China Direct power supply. And it's smaller. This is supposed to go up to 24 volts, has a digital readout, and it's supposed to go up to 3 amps, which is, you know, over 3 times what any of these things think they're supposed to be doing, except for this computer power supply, which didn't really pan out as any improvement either. So I really didn't have huge hopes for this, especially since this one hadn't done anything for me. But now, since we've got this one here that's got 4 inputs on it, and I've got 2 of these power supplies, I'm running 2 separate power supplies in here, and each one of them has the ability to deliver up to 3 amps, and it's really nice and smooth. What's happening now is maybe I'm not running into any shut-off issues on the big track. I have run into them on the small track still somewhat, but what I'm getting now with this is nice, smooth power delivery. It's definitely an advantage. And another advantage is, especially if I'm trying to run drone cars and cars of different brands and etc., I can adjust the voltage right here to put it where I want it. If I need the car to go faster, go slower, you know, whatever, you turn the knob and bingo. Works great. So far I'm having good luck with it. You've seen it in the last few race videos, and you'll be seeing it in the next ones. Yeah, I don't always win, but I've got it adjusted pretty well where it makes for a pretty good race. And if you're trying to have a little fun on the track by yourself with drone cars, this ends up being really the ticket. Get yourself a couple of these. They're $8 from China Direct. So 2 of these is still considerably less. If you tried to buy one of these tiny little Carrera power supplies, it would probably cost you $20, $30, $40, and then you have to pay shipping and all that too. You can get these for $8 a piece, shipping included. So $16 for 2 of them. You just clip off the connectors and wire them up. Heck, I used these little wire nuts. You can't get cheaper and easier than that. You know, a couple, $2, $3 for a package of a bunch of them. But anyway, that's how I'm running the track right now, and that's how you've seen from I guess the most recent drone videos. We're using these power supplies, 2 of them, and we're using this track setup that has the 4 inputs. Now I'll tell you one other thing about this track that has the 4 inputs. You cannot use even though it's the same black connector style right here on the track with the 3 inputs, this power supply or this plug will not work on the 4 input kind. It doesn't have the right little notches and everything to fit in here, right? So you can obviously modify it, grind it, whatever, but but that's a different story. It's not a direct fit. So that brings you to the power supply situation. You understand what's going on with the power supplies. The one other thing was power delivery I wanted to talk about. And if you've ever looked at any of the stuff about the bigger tracks that people are making, they always talk about having jumper cables. Well, you can buy jumpers from Carrera. The jumpers for their larger scale tracks, I communicated with them, and that actually works on this Carrera Go. You would just clip it into these holes and make sure that the polarity lines up. And what you do is you take the piece of track that's the closest to your power track, like say if this was right here, and you would use this track and you clip in here, and then you go to use the wires going out to another place on the track that's at about the halfway point. So you're able to deliver power there more effectively rather than having to go through the whole track to get back around to where you've attach those jumper wires. So it helps to get power delivery to all points of the track better. And as I noticed, some places the cars seem to slow down. I use these jumper cables. Now, I didn't buy the Carrera cables, and this is another tip. You can actually solder right in directly to these holes, and this track is pretty solid and pretty good plastic. It doesn't melt that easily. You can actually put a soldering iron down in these holes and pre-tin those holes, put some solder down in them, pre-tin your wires, solder them up in there real quick. Make sure once again, you line this up with your other piece of track that you're using, and make sure your polarity is exactly the same. That the right lane, right side is going to match up with the track it needs to match up with. The right lane, left side, all these things have to match up perfectly. And if you twist it around like this, all of a sudden you messed yourself around, because now you've got left here and it was the right. So it messes everything around. You have to make sure you keep that straight. Also, it helps. I guess one of the tips is just to put an arrow on your track, and I guess you could do it underneath too, so nobody sees it. Just put an arrow so you know which direction the track's going, and then you make sure you line up both of the pieces with those arrows and line up all the polarities perfectly. And so that's basically it. You don't need to spend much money to do that. You just need even just some medium gauge speaker wire, solder and a soldering iron, low wattage soldering iron, and you can do this for just a couple of bucks versus spending, I don't know, $30-something for the Carrera jumpers. So you don't need that. That's another way to get around your power issues. So now you've seen the basic issues on the power delivery to the track. That's what I've got going on right now. I'm still going to keep experimenting. I've got some other ideas. I'm going to look at removing some of this circuitry in here, because some of this relates to the turbo button and to the protection circuitry. I'm going to see how I can get rid of some of that so that cars won't cut out at all ever. And that's another goal. We'll see what else we can do with it. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. We'll talk to you later.